The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Drug Enforcement Administration have announced the completion of one of the largest operations against organized crime in the last 2 decades. The focus is on a network that investigators say is a direct extension of Pablo Escobar's empire. For 8 years, the structure quietly rebuilt what once seemed destroyed forever. Now, after coordinated raids in 4 countries, agents are revealing the scope of what they have uncovered. In February of last year, DEA analysts recorded anomalous capital movements through a number of companies in Panama. Transfers were made weekly. The amounts ranged from $200,000 to $500,000, but none of the companies had real offices or employees. Financial investigators began to track these flows, and after 3 months it became clear. The money was going to a network of warehouses and transport companies scattered between Colombia, Mexico, and the southern states of America. In parallel, FBI agents received data from informants inside Colombian structures. According to them, the new organization was formed from people who had once worked for the Medellin cartel or were associated with its remnants. The leadership consisted of 15 people, most of whom had experience in logistics, finance, and chemical production since the 90s. The scheme of work turned out to be more complex than the classic routes. The drugs were produced in 4 laboratories located in the mountainous regions of Colombia and Venezuela. The equipment was purchased through front companies in China and India, and the chemicals arrived in small batches so as not to attract the attention of customs. After production, the goods were divided into small loads and transported through a network of transshipment points. Some went by sea to Central America, from there by truck through Mexico. The rest flew in private planes to the islands of the Caribbean, where they were reloaded onto speedboats. Meanwhile, investigators had gathered enough evidence to obtain wiretapping warrants. For 6 months, experts intercepted conversations, tracked GPS signals from vehicles, and analyzed bank transactions. The picture was becoming clearer. The organization operated like a corporation with a clear hierarchy, accounting, and security. Each participant knew only his own area, and top executives communicated exclusively through encrypted channels. In June, agents determined that the network was preparing the largest shipment in its history. According to estimates, more than 18 tons of cocaine and methamphetamine were to be shipped along the route, distributed among 7 transport chains. The team then moves on to final preparations for the operation. The FBI, DEA, Colombian police, and Mexican federal agents synchronize their actions to strike simultaneously. The plan called for raids on 32 locations, from manufacturing facilities to the apartments of front persons who conducted financial affairs. Each team was given detailed maps, photos of suspects, and a list of priority evidence. The special forces trained on mock-ups of buildings, practicing speed of entry and minimizing risks to civilians. On the morning of June 23rd, the operation began. The first teams entered the laboratories in the mountainous region of Colombia. The facilities were well fortified, metal doors, video surveillance systems, and armed guards. After a short standoff, the agents took control of 2 complexes. Inside, they found industrial equipment, reactors, distillation columns, centrifuges, and thousands of liters of chemicals. According to preliminary calculations, the capacity of one laboratory allowed them to produce up to 1,000 kilograms of products per month. In parallel, the agents seized a 3rd laboratory near the border with Venezuela, where about 20 people worked. Most surrendered without resistance, but 3 tried to destroy electronic media and documents. Meanwhile, in Mexico, federal forces raided 6 warehouses and 3 private residences. In one of the homes, they found a room with server equipment used to coordinate deliveries and encrypt financial flows. Technicians immediately began copying data, hoping to find contacts of other members of the network. In another location, agents discovered an underground cash vault. Bundles of banknotes were in sealed containers, totaling more than $230 million. Some of the money had been packaged for shipment, likely to offshore banks. The team then moves on to the maritime part of the operation. Coast Guard patrol boats intercepted 2 cargo ships off the coast of Panama. After searching the holds, they found double-bottomed containers with packaged blocks of drugs hidden inside. In total, more than 4 tons of cocaine were seized from both ships. The crews were detained for further questioning, and the ships themselves were towed to a military port for a detailed examination. In parallel, agents stopped 3 trucks on the highway between Mexico and Texas. In hidden compartments of the transport, they found another 2.5 tons of methamphetamine and a large number of weapons, including automatic rifles and grenade launchers. In cities across the United States, FBI teams were arresting financial operators. These people lived ordinary lives. They rented offices, had legal businesses, and did not attract attention. But it was through their hands that millions of dollars passed, which were then dissolved in a system of shell companies, casinos, and investment funds. During the searches, laptops, flash drives, phones, and paper documents with detailed transaction records were seized. DEA analysts immediately began to analyze these materials to establish the complete money laundering chain. Meanwhile, investigators have tallied the total results of the operation. More than $9 billion in cash, assets, and confiscated property have been seized. More than 21 tons of drugs have been found, including cocaine, methamphetamine, and synthetic substances. 138 people have been detained in 5 countries, including key organizers, logisticians, chemists, and armed guards. 30 units of transport have been seized, including trucks, boats, and a private plane used for inter-island transportation. Prosecutors are preparing indictments. The suspects are charged with participation in a transnational criminal organization, drug production and distribution, money laundering, weapons possession, and corruption. Under United States law, the most serious charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without parole. The Colombian and Mexican sides have also filed their own indictments, which will be heard in local courts. In parallel, agents continue to analyze the seized data. Among the files were found correspondence with chemical suppliers, route maps, names of corrupt officials, and contacts with other criminal groups. This information could lead to new arrests and the expansion of the investigation to other regions. Investigators have already confirmed that the network had connections with groups in Europe and Asia, where it also exported some of its products. Representatives of the Federal Bureau of Investigation emphasize that this operation demonstrates that even the most organized structures can be revealed through patient work, international cooperation, and the technological capabilities of modern intelligence services. Each such strike not only removes huge amounts of drugs and money from circulation, but also destroys trust within criminal networks, making it difficult to restore them. Then the team moves on to the next stage: extradition of detainees, trials, and use of the information obtained to prevent future threats. The investigation is ongoing, and agents do not rule out new arrests in the near future. A week after the completion of the main phase of the operation, investigators focused on analyzing the seized digital trail. FBI cyber intelligence specialists worked around the clock to decrypt hard drives found in the Mexican residence. It turned out that the organization was using military encryption software, which is usually used by government agencies. After several days of work, it was possible to gain access to a database that contained a complete register of operations for the past 5 years. The files contained names, dates, amounts, and specific routes for each shipment. Meanwhile, DEA agents discovered that the cartel's financial structure was much more complex than initially thought. The money was funneled through 73 shell companies spread across 12 jurisdictions. Each firm performed a specific function. Some accepted cash from street dealers, others converted it into cryptocurrency, and still others invested it in real estate or legitimate businesses. The scheme was so extensive that even experienced financial analysts spent a month mapping out the entire flow. They estimated that more than $3 billion passed through the system each year, with only a third of that recorded in visible transactions. In parallel, agents began interrogating detainees. Most of the rank-and-file members knew little about the overall structure, but several middle-level managers agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. One of them, a former logistics worker nicknamed El Ingeniero, spoke about the communication system. It turned out that the top bosses never used their phones for more than 2 weeks and regularly changed SIM cards purchased with fake documents. Meetings were held exclusively in person, in public places where it was difficult to establish wiretapping. Couriers were used to convey orders, who did not know the content of the messages and simply handed over sealed envelopes. The team then moves on to the production side. Expert chemists who examined the laboratories discovered equipment capable of producing substances with a purity of 98%. This is a level usually achieved only by pharmaceutical companies. The analysis showed that the cartel hired professional chemists with university degrees, probably from Colombia and Mexico, who had previously worked in the legal industry. The salaries of these specialists reached $15,000 a month, which was significantly higher than the average income in the region. This approach allowed the organization to produce higher quality products that cost more on the black market. Meanwhile, in Panama, the local prosecutor's office has launched its own investigation into banking transactions. It turned out that 3 bank employees deliberately ignored suspicious transactions, receiving monthly payments from cartel representatives in return. The total amount of bribes exceeded $2 million over 3 years. Panamanian authorities arrested these individuals and froze the accounts of 19 other companies linked to the scheme. This decision blocked an additional $340 million, which will now become the subject of legal proceedings. In parallel, agents focused on the transportation network. It turned out that the organization owned or controlled 38 trucks, 16 speedboats, 4 private jets, and 2 cargo ships. Some of the transport was registered to front persons. Others were rented through legal companies that were unaware of the true purpose of the equipment. Investigators confiscated all these assets and transferred them to auctions, the funds from which will go to compensate victims of drug crime and finance anti-drug programs. The team then moves on to the international dimension of the case. It turned out that the cartel supplied drugs not only to the USA, but also to Europe and Australia. For European routes, container ships were used, heading to the ports of Spain and the Netherlands. The goods were hidden among legal cargo, coffee beans, tropical fruits, or industrial equipment. The customs services of these countries discovered 8 more containers, with drugs weighing a total of 3.5 tons. Europol coordinated the arrest of local distributors who worked with the Colombian network. Meanwhile, the U.S. Prosecutor's Office has begun the process of extradition of the main suspects. 5 people detained in Colombia and Mexico are to be transferred to the U.S. for trial. Among them are 2 people whom the investigation considers to be the direct leaders of the entire structure. One of them, a man nicknamed El Patron, according to agents, personally coordinated the work of the laboratories and controlled financial flows. The second, known as La Sombra, was responsible for security and the elimination of competitors. Both have many years of experience working since the days of the Medellin cartel and are considered extremely dangerous. In parallel, agents are investigating connections with corrupt officials. The seized documents found a list of 23 names, including police officers, judges, customs officers, and even 2 members of parliament. Each of them received regular payments for ignoring the cartel's activities or providing confidential information. The amounts ranged from $10,000 to $500,000 a year, depending on the level of access and usefulness. The relevant authorities in Colombia and Mexico have already begun internal investigations, and the first arrests among corrupt officials are expected in the near future. The team then moves on to studying the organization's social impact. It turned out that the cartel was actively engaged in so-called social investments in poor regions. They built schools, repaired roads, provided financial assistance to families. This created loyalty among the local population, who often refused to cooperate with the police. Agents encountered situations where residents of entire villages hid information about the movements of suspects or warned them about the approach of law enforcement officers. Now, government programs are trying to fill this vacuum, offering legal employment and social support to reduce the dependence of communities on criminal money. Meanwhile, experts are assessing the long-term consequences of the operation. They predict that the destruction of this network will lead to a temporary shortage of drugs on the American market, which could lead to rising prices and conflicts between smaller groups for control of territories. At the same time, it creates a window of opportunity for law enforcement agencies to increase pressure on other cartels as they try to redistribute the market. The DEA is already developing plans for further operations aimed at preventing the restoration of the destroyed structure. In parallel, agents continue to follow the financial trail. Some of the cartel's money was invested in legal businesses, hotels, restaurants, transport companies, even agricultural farms. These assets are now subject to confiscation, but legal proceedings could take years as the owners try to prove they were unaware of the criminal origin of the funds. Special teams of lawyers are working to ensure the rapid seizure of the assets and prevent them from being sold off or transferred to new front persons. The team then moves on to educational and preventive work. The results of the operation are used to train future agents and demonstrate the effectiveness of interagency cooperation. Detailed case studies have been created that show how combining traditional investigative methods with modern technologies allows us to uncover even the most protected criminal structures. These materials are transferred to partner agencies in other countries to increase the overall level of the fight against transnational crime. Law enforcement officials say Operation Legacy was made possible by years of work by hundreds of agents, analysts, and international partners. Each phase required precise coordination, patience, and a willingness to operate synchronously across multiple countries. The results exceeded expectations and demonstrated that no criminal organization, regardless of its size or history, can escape justice. The investigation is ongoing, with new data being analyzed daily, and agents are confident that many more arrests and convictions are on the way. A month after the initial arrests, investigators received an unexpected breakthrough. One of the detained chemists, who worked in the main laboratory, agreed to cooperate fully after being offered a witness protection program.